Thank you, Bonnie. This is on. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Now, we have a beautiful, beautiful day today. We do indeed. Some years ago, I gave a message here that I entitled, Practicing Your Presence, which I think fits in nicely with our theme this week. And I won't do the entire message again, but I do want to tell a story that I told back then. This was during the time of Pablo Picasso when he was still alive, and there were a rash of fake Picassos flooding the market. And since he was still alive, a number of collectors and museums and galleries got together and hired him to authenticate which ones were his and which ones were fake. And so they set him up in a room with a whole bunch of those paintings and a friend around to keep him company. And he's sorting through them. He's going, this one's mine, this one's mine, this one's fake, this one's mine. And at a certain point, he was about to say, this one's fake, and put it with the fakes. And his friend said, no, Pablo, that's one of yours. I was there when you painted it. And he looked again, and he said, I can fake a Picasso as well as anybody. The fakes. Now, what was he saying there? He was saying when he painted that, he wasn't painting with artistic integrity. He wasn't being Picasso. And I think that living in spiritual integrity means we don't fake our Picassos. We show up as ourselves. We practice our own presence. Now, when Reverend Bonnie was here, she read some, this is not in the right place for me. Up? I don't want it, okay. Oh, at that speaker, gotcha. Technical things, the science in religious science. That should be good. Okay, and then when I sit, we'll have to redo it again. Maybe a little lower. When Reverend Bonnie was here, she gave us various definitions for the word integrity, and one of them was the quality or state of being complete or undivided. And when I heard that, it rang a bell with me of something that Ernest Holmes wrote in seminar lectures. Logic and reason compel us to accept that the universe is a unitary wholeness. But we do not stop to think what this means, that it is a unitary wholeness. That it is a unitary wholeness, that which is one naturally is undivided and indivisible. So complete or undivided. Matches up there. She read to us a passage from the Science of Mind magazine defining spiritual integrity. Bringing our awareness of wholeness into the many different aspects or parts of our lives. And I thought about that. And I thought about, in relation to this message, the different aspects or parts of my life. And I thought about bringing, not just the way it was phrased there, but the reverse as well, bringing the different aspects of my life into that awareness of wholeness. So I'm going to talk about different aspects of my life, only some of them, because otherwise we'd be here a real long time. Probably one of the earliest aspects of my life is mathematics. Hello there. And when I think of the word integrity, I realize it has the same root as the word integer, and an integer is a whole number that's complete in itself. It also has the same root as the word integration. And integration in mathematics is a summing together of an infinite number of things to create one whole thing again. There's that connection there. So I'm bringing that into what we just discussed in terms of religious science. Now, as I say, Reverend Bonnie read to us a number of definitions from the dictionary. I went and looked in Ernest Holmes' Dictionary of New Thought. And what he didn't have the word integrity, but he did have the word integration. And his definition of it is mental wholeness, the putting together of all parts of the mind so that they function as one normal individual. So it's summing together, putting together all the different parts of the mind to make one thing again. So we see these concepts coming over and over again in different aspects of what has been my life. Now, if math is one of the oldest parts of my life, editing is one of the most recent. Sometime, hopefully in the near future, we'll be adding a certified StoryGrid editor to that list of things in my bio, because I've recently gone to a certification training in the StoryGrid method of editing. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details about it. There is a website, storygrid.com. The StoryGrid was created by an editor who has about 30 years of experience editing in the top publishing houses and elsewhere, and named Sean Coyne. And when I went to the certification, one of the things that Sean impressed upon us was that in this StoryGrid method, it's not so much that there are rules for writing that have to be obeyed, as there are principles to be observed in order to make a story work. So, not rules, but principles. Where have I heard that before? Bringing it all together into one thing. One of the principles that Sean taught us, see, this is why I want the mic, that Sean taught us is when we're looking at a story, we want to find out what it is that a character wants, what they're going for, what they consciously want, but also what they perhaps, bless you, perhaps not consciously need. So their wants and their needs, and often in a story, their wants and their needs are in some sort of a conflict. If they go after what they want, they don't get what they need. If they end up getting what they need, they may not get what they want. And this makes for a good story, but may not make for a good life. You want your wants and your needs to be integrated, to form an undivided whole. So there are methods to do that, and some of them are in another aspect of my life, NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Neuro-linguistic programming has a number of presuppositions. That is, these are just things that you assume going in. One of them is there is no failure, there is only feedback, which we can remember when thinking about our sound system. But another one is I already have, or a person already has all the resources they need to solve their problems. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they have all the skills or all the knowledge that they need, but they have the resources to obtain those skills and that knowledge. And so when you go to an NLP practitioner, they assume that you've already got all the resources that you need, and they help simply to access those resources in a productive way so that then you can solve your problem. And somehow that sounds familiar. I already have everything I need within me. Again, there's that connection there with New Thought and science of mind, maybe even math and editing, who knows? One of the things that Bonnie read to us was from a book whose title I forget and whose author I forget, and you'd think I'd have written it in here, but no. But she read to us, "Happiness is a decision, a posture toward life." And I like to use the word attitude instead. It's a word we use a lot in NLP. Again, an attitude toward life, happiness. And this definitely rang a bell with me because one of my NLP teachers that I took a training with, Wyatt Woodsmall, said to us in that training, "We don't become happy. We remember to be happy." And this was in a larger context of the training where he pointed out that this event or that event or this thing happening doesn't make us happy. At most, it reminds us that we have within us the all the things that we need in order to be happy. We know how to be happy. We have that inside us. We have to remember to be happy. And one of the founders of NLP, Richard Bandler, puts it this way: to feel good for no reason. Feel for no reason. Just feel good, because again, you have the capacity to feel good. You have everything inside you to feel good. Do it for no reason. So bringing that, all that together in part of that unitary wholeness. I said before about having your wants and your needs line up, having the different parts of you work in the same direction. And there is a methodology for that in NLP that we more or less call parts work. Now, a lot of people don't like to call it parts work because people take the metaphor of us having parts inside of us too literally. And it's just a metaphor, but it's a very useful one. And a lot of times you'll hear people talk about self-sabotage. I give a whole workshop in saying, no, that's not a very productive metaphor. You know, you're fighting against yourself. When you fight against yourself, that is the ultimate no-win situation. And what we think of instead in NLP is, okay, you have parts of you, again, as a metaphor, that are in charge of pursuing different goals that are of benefit to you. And the way that they have of pursuing those goals, those ways may get in each other's way. But it's not one is sabotaging the other. So like, for instance, you say, I want to lose weight, and I want to eat food that I like and that satisfies me. Two perfectly valid, good goals. But when we eat the food that satisfies us, a lot of times people will call that self-sabotage. Not realizing that the other way around is also a kind of self-sabotage. If all you do is eat food that you don't like and it doesn't satisfy you because you want to lose weight, that's also getting in your own way. That's also sabotaging yourself if you think in terms of sabotage. So what in NLP we do is we have methods for getting those two parts to pursue those goals in ways that don't conflict with each other, that integrate with each other. So again, there's that notion of an undivided, to make yourself an undivided and indivisible whole, rather than these different parts that seem to be in conflict because the way they're going about things are in conflict. Remember the notion of separate the person from the behavior, separate the part from its behavior, and don't think of it as something to get rid of. And there was one part in particular that we all have that I want to talk about. And Ernest Holmes talks about it. In Living the Science of Mind, he says this: this law of our emotional being, that the ego must not be rejected, is fundamental. This is a fundamental law. This is a law that other things are built on, that the ego must not be rejected because it's part of our unitary whole. In fact, saying part of the whole doesn't make unitary whole doesn't make sense, but we have words and we have to use them. In Seminar Lectures, again, that book, he says again, the ego must not be rejected. It has to be wanted, needed, and loved. So both wanted and needed. The wants and the need have to be, and of course it must have to be needed if we all have it. You know, it must be there for a reason. So what is that reason? Well, again, one of the parts of a definition of integrity that Reverend Bonnie read to us is sound of construction. I have to say, when I read my notes on that, I thought of jackhammers and nail guns and sound. But of course, it means having a sound construction, having a construction that works. Just like when I'm doing the editing, it's having a story that is constructed in a way that works to be constructed in a way that works and is sound. And she asked the questions, How do I, the I of the I am, and I may or may not get into that whole I am thing, want to express in this moment? Who am I really? What is your spiritual integrity built on? What is the structure that you have inside of you? And I've been thinking about this kind of thing for a while, and I'd say that structure that you have inside of you, that your spiritual integrity is built on, is in fact our egos. Just as Ernest Holmes says, it is fundamental. And I want to go a little bit into how our spiritual integrity is built on this thing. So I want to use some analogies here. Just as we all have egos, we all have skin. And what is the purpose of the skin? Well, it has a number of purposes, but one of them is to maintain our bodily integrity, right? Without the skin, everything would just fall out. So that's what it's there for. But the skin can develop malfunctions. They can have skin diseases, some of which actually are harmful to the body's integrity. Does that mean that the problem is that we have skin? No, the problem is that there's a problem with the skin, that it's not functioning properly. Or think of our immune systems. Again, our immune systems are there to help maintain bodily integrity, to keep things that would be harmful to the body out. But again, immune systems can malfunction. One way in which they can malfunction is an allergy. An allergy is essentially your immune system making a mistake. It's mistaking something that is harmless or even beneficial for something that is harmful, and that causes problems. But again, you don't say, well, my problem is I have an immune system. If I could only get rid of that, everything would be fine. No, the problem is that there's a problem with the immune system, that it's not acting in a healthy manner. So when there are problems that come about because of our egos, the problem isn't that we have them. The problem isn't that we have to dissolve them or sacrifice them or all these other, bad words that we say about them. The problem is that there's malfunctioning and needs to be healed. That's all. We need to have healthy egos. So I would just add that word to what Ernest Holmes says. The ego must not be rejected. It has to be wanted, needed, healed, and loved, so that we get closer to the awareness of that unitary wholeness. Now, why do I say that our egos are there to maintain our spiritual integrity? That's the I in the I am that Reverend Bonnie was talking about. That's what the word ego means. It means I in Latin and Greek. It's what keeps us as individualized centers of consciousness rather than just being dispersed. The way a drop of water falls into the ocean, yes, it's one with the ocean, but it's gone. It's not there anymore. But as Ernest Holmes says, even though we are one with it all, we are not absorbed by it. And it is that ego's function to keep us from being absorbed by it. This is the conclusion I've come to after a lot of thought about it. So, maintaining our spiritual integrity, heal your ego. Don't try and get rid of it. Heal it. Now, as I've said any number of times, no matter how much we talk about oneness and wholeness, we still, partly because of language and partly because of our culture and even spiritual teaching, tend to fall back into these notions of duality. And so I want to go back to the reading and how Ernest Holmes said very clearly, it's not like there's some sort of spiritual system up high, even though we have this symbol here of the Science of Mind symbol. That's more of a scaffolding when you're talking about scaffolding rather than foundation. It's there for a while to get us to understand certain things, but then once the structure is built, scaffolding goes away. The foundation remains. And so it's not like there's this spiritual thing and there's this mental thing and there's this physical thing, and the physical is just sort of some manifestation of what the spiritual is. No, Ernest Holmes makes it very, very clear. The physical is the spiritual. The spiritual is the mental is the physical. They're all the same thing that we use different words for in different contexts. But to remember that unitary wholeness over and over again, and it's very important to remind ourselves of that, because so much teaching denies that. Says that, no, that what you really are is spirit, and this body is just not. No, it's all one thing. And so I have no problem whatsoever in correcting any spiritual teacher, no matter who they are or what they say, when they imply that. I will correct the Jedi Master if I have to. So when Yoda tells Luke, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter, well, he's half right. Luminous beings are we, yes. This vibrant matter is the luminous being. It's a hard one to get to, because we're told the opposite. As I loved Teresa's talk last week, but when she used that phrase, earth suit, I cringed. Because that's separation. And I'd like you to think about this for a minute. Think about sometime in the recent past, or the far past if it has to be, when you hugged somebody, not just a nice hug, but a deep embrace with a deep emotional connection. You can't tell me that was your earth suit, hugging their earth suit. That's you hugging them, embracing them. There is no distinction. There is no distinction. So I really want to drive this home, so I want to give a few more examples. If you were to ask a botanist, how does grass grow? They might say something like this, bear with me. Growth occurs through the increase in the number of cells by cell division in meristematic tissue and through cell enlargement and elongation. Most new cells are produced in the apical meristem. Groups of new cells in the apical meristem form growth centers and develop into leaf primordia, which develop into phytomers, and so on. And it eventually goes into photosynthesis and transpiration. Now, if you were to ask someone who is a student of Kabbalah, how does the grass grow? They will say, above each leaf of grass, there is an angel saying, grow, grow. Now, my point is, those are not two different explanations. Those are the same explanation expressed in different vocabularies, emphasizing different things. But the spiritual is the physical. And that's something, again, to remember and to remember. I'll go through just a couple more, or maybe just one more. We'll see how it goes. Wayne Dyer wrote a book called There is a Spiritual Solution to Every Problem. And, okay, good. Let's say the problem is you're in a room and you're reading, it's gotten dark because it's nighttime. Well, you could sit and meditate. Close your eyes. Think about light. Draw the light to you. Meditate about light. Visualize light. And it will become light eventually because it'll be morning. Or you can go and turn the light on. Now again, my point is, those are both spiritual solutions to that problem. one is just faster than the other and more efficient. And we might think of one as physical and one as spiritual, but they're both physical. They're both spiritual because the physical is the spiritual, is the mental. It's a unitary wholeness. So, since we seem to be giving out homework this month, I've got some homework for you. To think of living in spiritual integrity as living as a unitary wholeness, one thing. A lot of times we think of someone as being a hypocrite because they seem to be saying one thing and doing another, or doing one thing here and another thing there. That's not necessarily hypocrisy. It could just be inconsistency. They're just not consistent. They have different parts of them that activate at different times. So the goal is for each of us to arrive at a consistency by integrating those different parts into wholeness. Think about when you post on Facebook. Is it kind and true and needed all the time? Is it something that you would say is part of a message up here? If not, work on that so that you're living as a unitary wholeness. You don't have a Facebook self and a center self. And I would say this above all, remind yourself daily, that the physical is the spiritual is the mental is the physical, and it's all one thing, and so it is.